The Bible's most radical feminist wasn't who you think. Imagine a world where a woman was legally considered the property of her father or husband, where she couldn't speak to a man in public unless he was her relative, where her voice in court carried little to no weight. This wasn't some dystopian novel. It was reality for most women in first-century Palestine. And into that world stepped a man whose treatment of women was so radically different, it shook the very foundations of his culture. Today we're asking a provocative question. Was Jesus the first feminist in history? The answer, found in the Bible, is far more layered and surprising than you might expect. Let's look at what Jesus actually did, how he treated women, and what it all means for conversations about feminism today. To understand how radical Jesus was, we have to step into the world he lived in. First-century Palestine was a cultural melting pot, dominated by Roman power and shaped by Jewish tradition. And for women, it was a world full of invisible walls. In Jewish society, a woman's place was clearly in the home. Her family's honor depended on her modesty and silence. Speaking directly to a man in public, especially one who wasn't her relative, was considered improper, if not scandalous. Religious education? Reserved for men. Women weren't invited to sit at a rabbi's feet to study scripture. Their participation in religious life was often limited to the outer courts of the temple. Even in legal matters, their word was often dismissed. Women were seen as emotional, irrational, and inferior, which drastically limited their potential and public influence. Life for a woman was domestic, silent, and socially restricted. Politics, theology, leadership, those belonged to the men. And yet, this is the world Jesus disrupted, not with manifestos, but with deeply human, revolutionary encounters. Jesus didn't write books on equality. He embodied it through radical acts of inclusion and respect. Here are 4 encounters that flipped the script of his time. Case Study 1. The Theologian at the Well. John 4th. Jesus stops to rest at a well in Samaria, enemy territory. A Samaritan woman arrives. She's had 5 husbands and now lives unmarried, socially and morally outcast. What does Jesus do? He speaks to her, alone, publicly, and not just small talk. He engages her in one of the deepest theological conversations in the entire New Testament about living water, worship, and the coming Messiah. And then, he reveals his identity as the Christ to her before anyone else. She runs back to her village, leaving her water jar behind, and becomes the first evangelist, saying, "Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could he be the Christ?" Through this one encounter, Jesus crosses gender, ethnic, and moral boundaries and empowers a woman to spread his message. Case Study 2. The Right to Learn. Luke 10. Jesus visits the home of Martha and Mary. Martha prepares the meal, the traditional woman's role. But Mary does something shocking. She sits at Jesus' feet, the formal posture of a disciple. Only men did that. Martha complains. She expects Jesus to tell Mary to get back in the kitchen. But Jesus defends Mary, saying, "Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her." In one sentence, Jesus endorses a woman's right to study Scripture and pursue spiritual depth, not as a helper, but as a full disciple. Case Study 3. Restoring Dignity. Luke 13. Jesus heals a woman who had been crippled for 18 years. The synagogue leader is furious, not at the healing, but that it happened on the Sabbath. Jesus responds, "You'd untie your ox on the Sabbath, but this woman, a daughter of Abraham, doesn't deserve freedom?" That phrase, daughter of Abraham, was unheard of. Son of Abraham was a title of honor for Jewish men. But Jesus applies it to a woman, restoring not just her health, but her social and spiritual status. He lifts her from the margins and declares her fully part of God's covenant people. Case Study 4: The Most Important Witnesses. The final, and perhaps most powerful example comes after Jesus' death. While the male disciples are hiding, a group of women, Mary Magdalene, Salome, and others, go to the tomb. They find it empty, and an angel tells them, "He is risen. Go tell the disciples." In a society where a woman's testimony didn't count in court, God chooses women as the first witnesses of the resurrection, the most important event in Christianity. Had this been a fabricated story, it would have featured powerful male witnesses. But the gospel writers preserved the truth. Women were the first to see and proclaim the risen Christ. They became the apostles to the apostles. If by feminist you mean a political activist fighting for women's voting rights or modern policies, then no, Jesus wasn't that. But if feminism means believing in the full dignity, equality, and calling of women, and acting on that belief, then yes, Jesus was deeply aligned with those values. His actions weren't accidental. They were an extension of his message. In God's kingdom, the last become first. The invisible are honored. The marginalized are brought into the center. Jesus didn't just tolerate women. He trusted them, taught them, defended them, and commissioned them. While later church traditions often sidelined women, Jesus empowered them, front and center. So what do we take away? Jesus' treatment of women wasn't just kind, it was revolutionary. He gave them voice, value, and vision. Whether you call that feminism or not, the message is clear. The Bible offers a Jesus who uplifted women when society cast them aside. Their witness, their discipleship, their strength were foundational to the Christian movement. So what do we take away? Jesus' treatment of women wasn't just kind, it was revolutionary. He gave them voice, value, and vision. Whether you call that feminism or not, the message is clear. The Bible offers a Jesus who uplifted women when society cast them aside. Their witness, their discipleship, their strength were foundational to the Christian movement. Which of these stories surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And if you want more faith-based history and theology, hit subscribe and share this with someone who still thinks the Bible is anti-women. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next episode.